It is the Anfield Wrap. Neil Atkinson, joined by Phil Blundell, Gareth Roberts, and Dan Morgan. This show this week is brought to you in association with absolutely everything Marcus Rashford says. Let's bear that in mind as we move forward. And coming up, we've got John Gibbons with Lawrence Westgaff. And we will talk Phil Coutinho. That is to come as well. Coutinho is going to be talked about on this show. But we will start with the fact that the football is back. And Dan Morgan, you were just saying we were having a little chat off air, and you were saying that we've all just got to sort of see how it plays out, how these games are. I think there's a general sense that the games will, possibly follow a similar model to Germany, where you've seen the intensity rise game by game. But there's no sense yet as to how the Premier League is going to restart and what to expect from the footballers.
Yeah, I think intrigue's very much the word I'm using with it. I think that everyone has to sort of measure it on their own individual sense of comfort around it and normality. And it'll take a lot of getting used to, I think, for a lot of people. But I think the benefit for Liverpool is that there's very much a job to be done. And there's a job in hand. And I think that can sort of sharpen the focus for Liverpool supporters and the Liverpool team and manager, it must be said, going forward. So, for example, if you're someone like Everton, just the closest example I can think of, it will be a sole focus on just how this feels and how you can relate to it as a football fan and how you can relate to it as a normal. Whereas for us, that very much feels secondary to the fact that we need to go and win the Premier League for the first time in 30 years. And I think that can benefit us in the immediate term, but also in the time after we hopefully win it within the first few games, in that we can sort of find our bedding in period without that pressure then of anything being there and sort of use the time to see how it might affect next season too.
It's... Man City, Gareth play Arsenal on Wednesday, and it's a bit like a Liverpool game. You're going to be doing it on hot mic with us with a bit of luck, if we can all make the tech work, and I'm sure we can. But it also becomes our first sort of big game, and I'm sort of struck to go, well, what do you actually want? Do you know what I mean? Like, I do want them to win it at Anfield. I can understand everyone who wants the idea of them winning it at Goodison, but I think because there's no one there, it'll always be deemed a strange thing. But I just also want to see them go and win 2 games with it. The excitement is building a bit for me. I'm intrigued, but also there is this massive prize on the horizon in the very short term.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've had the chat now for me about what we're going to miss and what it won't be. So for me now that the tide's turned, and let's concentrate on what it will be, because it's on the horizon. It's going to happen. It's good. We've had 3.5 months. We've had 3.5 months without watching our football team, and okay, it's going to be different, but I'm excited by it now. I mean, just seeing the highlights from the Blackburn game the other day and stuff like that, I could feel straight away that I was more emotionally invested watching that than I have been at any point watching the Bundesliga or anything else really. And so
they were good as well, so that helped.
Yeah, there was that as well, and there was loads of high points about that game and about the performances and about players that you maybe didn't expect to be doing stuff. Absolutely love Hoover putting a top in with his wrong foot. But so there's loads to get excited about now, isn't there? And I think it's fascinating as well. I understand what Dan's saying. Like it's almost like a sort of psychological experiment. I think some of the media now around it's really interesting. I was reading Jonathan Northruff's piece where he spoke to Ben Foster, who I always think is quite an interesting fella anyway.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, he said he didn't want to give too much away, but he said he'd had lots of chats about how they get up for it, how they get as motivated as they normally would be with a crowd behind them, because obviously they haven't got that. But I just think all that's fascinating, and all the talk we've seen as well about, players that perform well in training or whatever and maybe lose it a little bit when there's 50,000 there. Could it be better for younger players? We've seen some younger players played well the other day at an empty Anfield. Would they be overawed when it was full? Loads of fascinating stuff like that. But, top of the list is that we're top of the league and that we're going to win the league. And, I was thinking again this morning about all the asterisk bollocks and all the tainted title bollocks and all this. And I used to have this lovely little green encyclopedia thing that my nan bought me when I was a kid. And it had a footy section in it. And I used to love reading it. And, like mad score lines in there. Like, was it Arbroath or someone won 36-0 once or something like that. And I just remember, like, you know, always reading all these facts and figures in this encyclopedia. Well, when some kid's reading an encyclopedia in the future, he's just going to see Liverpool won a title. There isn't going to be a fucking asterisk. There isn't going to be a tweet from a Blair saying it's tainted. It's just going to say Liverpool won a 19 title. That'll do for me.
Don't know about you, Phil. I think that Gareth's under ambitious there. I was looking at 36-0 against the Blues. But, you know, he's
109 points as well, or something like that.
Yeah. Well, just on the points record thing, because I think there's three phases to this. There's win it and possibly win it City. And those, I think, are interrelated, Phil, the way the games break as well. Then there's the middle three, which are all against teams you would expect us to beat under normal circumstances. But it'll be post the big relief and the big release. So you can't quite be sure about that. And two of those three sides will be fighting for their lives. And then the last three is where maybe there are chats about points records. And I'm intrigued as to where we're all going to end up on the points record front, because I think right now we'd all have, you know, just gone, well, I just want it won and it's the first one in 30 years. But there is a real chance here that this Liverpool side is able to, the asterisk denotes most points anybody ever got. And that isn't beyond not beyond the realm of possibility. If they just carry on at the rate they went on before it broke, they'd smash 100 points. They really could put a milestone in that will take decades to see anyone surpass it.
Yeah, there was. I mean, it's going back a few months. This talk almost, because there were people sort of like, "Oh no, I'm not bothered about these records. I just want to win the title," which is fair enough as a viewpoint. But this Liverpool team could do things that no one can ever do again. Like, there's only 4 teams who've got more than 95 points ever.
Yeah,
we're one of them already. So if we then go past 100, how many teams are realistically ever going to go past 100, 102, 103 points? We can still get 109. You know, there's 9 games to go. We can still get 109 points, which is an absurd thing, because that just means if you fail to win 2 games at any point, you can't get 109 points. And we played 75% of the season and we're still there. So I think they'll go for. Everything coming out says that they're going to have a crack at that. And if you look at the likes of, if you look at Germany, you see Bayern Munich have won every game. Dortmund have won every game, bar the one they played against Bayern Munich. So it's obviously a very, very small sort of sample to look at as to represent what's going to happen. But there is an argument that the top teams, the better teams, and maybe this is doing the other teams down a little bit, the more professional teams, actually advantaged by this more in terms of they're just better. And the better team is coming out as winning.
But the other thing on that, Phil, is that Liverpool have won 27 times out of 29 when
exactly
there anyway. So, you know, it would just be a continuation, and I think that'll be something which, you know, will have to be hammered home when somebody writes something daft about how it wouldn't have happened if they weren't playing behind closed doors, forgetting they've won 27 out of 29, when you can have 100,000 people there and we'll still beat you. You know, they've been good at that. It is, though, you know, I'll just come back to you on that briefly and around the Blackburn game. For me, it was fascinating watching them play, watching the patterns of play. But what Mowbray said post-match, I think, and Mowbray's, you know, he's been around the game for a while. It reminded me a little bit of Chris Wilder, actually. Very generous in what he said about Liverpool, but he was also very honest. That idea that you play your own game, you don't get to play 3 passes, I think is a really good way to describe this Liverpool team. That at times, all the way through the season, there's been opposing fans, whether they support the team we're playing or not, it was saying, well, why don't they just do what they normally do? And it was as though Mowbray was saying, well, it's impossible to do what you normally do against them. They make it impossible. And I think you saw that just in the highlights against Blackburn.
Yeah, it's probably the reason we are so good and we have got so many points, is that teams basically have to come into games against us and do something they aren't used to, do something that isn't normal to them, do something that's outside the comfort zone, do something that they just don't do every week. And if you have to do that as a footballer, there's no familiarity with things. There's no, my teammates will be there and I can just pass the ball there blindly, which they do. They know where exactly. They work on stuff in training day in, day out. That means that they can almost just play blind football because they're able to know exactly where their teammate. Now, we remove any element of that from teams.
I think, Dan, I think shape will be, because the crowd won't be there, because of the knock-on effect of all of that. I think people are going to notice how remarkable the shape of this Liverpool side is and how it breaks opposition sides. I think the focus is going to be able to be on that more. That's genuinely what I'm expecting to see. When I've seen the game against Bayern Munich this season, whenever I've seen Bayern Munich play behind closed doors, I've been overwhelmed by how good their shape is, the size of them, the way they just pin sides in. the fact that sides have got to play really well, not even to break the press, but to just make it switch off for a minute, to make it sort of, to give them a bit of breathing space. And I think it might actually help contextualise what this Liverpool side's brilliant at, with no one in the ground. So people might actually be saying, finally, they just break what the opposition want to do.
Yeah, and I think as well, I think you'll probably be able to hear it. I'm fascinated by the acoustics of it.
Henderson saying he can't swear as much.
So that's running.
Good luck with that, lad. I think that's what I've been kind of fascinated with the snippets that we've got of Liverpool so far, is that you can sort of hear the triggers. You can hear it from the sidelines, you can hear it from the back four, you can hear it from the likes of Henderson, that when those situations arise, we're only used to seeing them visually. It's almost like, it is like the sound's blocked out. But to almost hear that as well, that's where you get to see what they're working on every day. That's where you see those. I mean, you can go back to Palo Alto, can't you, in 2016, was it, where all the talk coming out of that camp was that it's all about situations, and when the ball breaks down in certain situations, you're almost playing through these, synchronizations of football that haven't actually occurred yet. And all of this is programmed into these players. And like you say, without sort of, because the lack of the crowd takes away the romantic element, doesn't it? It takes away the sort of tribal elements of what's going on around the football match itself. I think you're going to get to solely focus, like you say, on just how good this Liverpool team is. And I think it's interesting they picked Blackburn. Blackburn are not ripping up trees by any stretch in the Championship. But I read before the game, the top 10 in the league for statistics such as pressing, challenging, intensity, passing, and possession. Now that's almost a little bit Benfica B to me. That they're picking them out, and they're not averse to being a little bit 4-4-2, 4-4-1-1, which sort of says to you, the first 3 games here, we need you to kind of mimic what we're going to come up against. And if that's what Liverpool are going to sort of put out when they're up against the likes of Everton and Palace, then you can see it that they'll have the league wrapped up, and then it's a case of like you said before, what can we do in terms of moving on to points tallies? And just on that, like I said at the top, it's interesting to me that if you sort of put us next to City in that context, City are almost having to wait until the end of the season to have something to play for. If these domestic and European Cup competitions are going to be in kind of a round-robin tournament form over a week at the end of the season, I think the psychological elements, that's much more difficult to adopt, as opposed to we hit the ground running, we find our feet with it, and then we sort of almost go straight into the next season with this mindset, and then whatever changes we'll adopt as that goes, as opposed to we have to kind of see how this is, and then at the end of the season we have this mad 2 weeks where
we've got to win the Champions League and there might be an FA Cup final.
Exactly.
Just Gareth, on that sort of the Blackburn thing, they're only 3 points off a playoff place. They're not Premier League class, obviously, but they're not League One either. They're not absolute mugs, and Liverpool have done them there 6-0, and that's a valuable game for Blackburn. Blackburn themselves will know what's on the horizon. I think one of the things that'll come from this is, and it shouldn't be there anyway, Liverpool have won, I'll keep saying it, 27 out of 29, with crowds as aggressive, as noisy as you like. Liverpool have won 27 out of 29. But I do think one of the things that is going to be clear to people once this is finished is what we've been saying all the way through, that there's an absolute gulf between Liverpool, maybe Liverpool and City. City have had 2 phenomenal seasons and they've really underperformed this season. Maybe Liverpool and City, and then everyone else. And I think that's just going to be writ large, week in, week out, that these sides, that we go to Brighton, and Brighton are closer to Blackburn than they are to Liverpool, even though they play in the same league as Liverpool.
Yeah, I think you will see that. I think I've got no worries about Liverpool, I've got to be honest, in that, as I said before, there's been a lot of talk about what we're going to miss and what we won't have. But I still think back to, when we were privileged enough, me and John, to get that insight into the training session in Hong Kong. And I absolutely loved that. It was brilliant because, there they were in a training grounds in boiling hot heat. And I remember walking up to it thinking, this is going to be nothing like the sort of intensity that you see when you go and watch them in a match. And then, Jesus Christ, Ben Woodburn was knocking Adam Lallana on his arse. Linders was kicking off on everyone. They were playing this game, and as soon as they won possession, he wanted them on the break, and he was pulling them to say you weren't fast enough or it was a pass too many. So, the the amount that they've been drilled over the years, the amount that they know what they're doing, the stuff that we talked about there about, it's almost second nature to them. You're going to see all that. And plus, you got added on top of that Liverpool wanted this. There are some clubs there, some players there that didn't want this, that wanted the season to end, that wanted points per game, that wanted to avoid relegation to some trapdoor or whatever. Liverpool wanted this. Liverpool wanted to be crowned champions. So they've got what they wanted. The players are going to be motivated. And I think they can play in any circumstance. I think all we've got to do this week is remind ourselves of exactly how good they are. You're quite right to say 27 out of 29, but also the 44-game unbeaten run, the matching cities run and all that, been breaking records all the way along.
Yeah.
And I think, you can get blasé about it. You can get blasé about how good Liverpool are. And I enjoyed this morning reading Gary Neville because, as much as he's very, very good at what he does, deep down, he's still a mank. Deep down, he still doesn't want Liverpool to win things and be great. And you could sense the fear in the interview he's done today where he's talking about, this Liverpool side, it could celebrate this title and then go on and win it again. And that's what you want. And that's what Man United did. That's what the sides Neville played in did. And he's saying in the interview, he's going, I'd love to say, like, this is them at the peak. They're going to win the league and then there's going to be a drop-off. But the unspoken thing was, I don't think that's going to happen. And, he's worried. Manx are worried. Everyone's worried. And we get to go, we're supporting one of, if not the best clubs in the world right now. So it's going to be fantastic to see them swatting everyone again.
Gareth, just back on that, there's so many players to be excited about. There's the obvious one, which is all the boss ones, like, the lads who've been terrific all the way through the season, the goalkeeper, Virgil van Dijk, the centre-halves, all the back four, all the midfielders who play week in, week out in the front three. Like, I'm excited about watching them. But then you've also thrown in, and there's Minamino and Keita, and they're exciting. And then you're thinking, and there's some really exciting young prospects. That's the thing, I just want to watch them play. 9 games isn't enough for me. Can we arrange a few more? You know what I mean? Can we get to 12 and 13? Because I just want to watch all these footballers play, and there's so many of them I'm excited just to watch because they're brilliant, and there's others I'm excited to watch because I think we're going to see the best of them, or they're going to come on leaps and bounds. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you want to see where they can go and what they can do, don't you? I think it's interesting that Klopp sort of stopped saying now, when and if and all that. He's just not if. He's just saying when. He's openly saying, oh yeah, we're going to win the league. You have that weird thing in football that you should never say that and all that. But, 6 points is the most that we're going to need. It could be less. We're going to win it. And then it is what Phil's talking about. How many more records can we break? How many more points can we win? And how can we prepare ourselves to be ready for next season? I'm excited by that as well. I'm excited by what you're talking about there about can we win it, get it done, celebrate however we're going to celebrate, and then start thinking about, okay, let's give some of these other lads minutes now, get them used to the first team, get them, up to speed, ready for the restart of the next season. So get Curtis Jones to another level, get Minamino to another level, get Naby Keita to where we want him to be, the lad we watched on YouTube so many times, the lad who was ripping it up in the Bundesliga. Do all that and be ready to go to another level. I mean, I remember, in terms of a period of football, that Brendan Rodgers end of season where we battered Newcastle and stuff like that. I got really excited about that because I started to think, shit, what can we do next season now with that football, with that group? And I think that could be what we see here because I think there's an argument to say this has played to our advantage. Because you think of like Sadio Mane, Mo Salah, Bobby Firmino, a few others. There was an argument to say they'd played too much football and they were starting to look a bit jaded.
They were going to have summer tournaments for Firmino. Yeah. There was next January for the AFCON, which hasn't been confirmed it moves yet, but it looks like that. You did get the impression they were all going to be under the cosh, and now instead they've had a bit of time just to refresh.
Exactly, and it's 3.5 months without a Premier League game for Liverpool when they kick off at Goodison Park. We know how closely they're monitored by all the health experts at Liverpool. So if someone needed to literally put their feet up and, smash a box set or whatever for a couple of weeks, you imagine Liverpool would have said that to them. So we could see Liverpool playing with even more intensity than they were doing back in March. So That to me is why it's really, really exciting now, because, you know, we didn't want to get pumped by Watford and we didn't want to go out of the Champions League, and neither did they, and they'll be fuming. They'll want to put that right. So that's another reason to be motivated, another reason to be up for it, and another reason is that it's Everton and it's Goodison Park and it's a derby as well. There's so many reasons that we should be up for it and they should be up for it, and I fully expect everyone will be.
There's Phil, last little thing on this is the idea of, you know, getting to see players like Minamino and Keita. The 5 subs thing's interesting. You can only play them in 3 batches. You can only break play 3 times. You can do them at half time as well, but you can only break play 3 times over the course of a game. It does open the possibility of being able to select, for instance, a pretty strong 9 or 10 and have a look at one. And I suspect Liverpool, certainly maybe after the first 2 games are out the way, if they go the way Liverpool will hope, you may well see a little bit of that from this side. We may well see the opportunity be there for a few players to almost establish themselves as part of the core group.
Yeah, I think you might even see something like Trent in midfield for a bit. I think you could see all kinds of things. But it does, as you say, it gives you the option to do a lot, because it's not just that you can have 5 subs, you can name 9 as well, I think, can't you?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that means you've got, 20 players involved, it's going quite deep, and especially if a couple get injured as well, which is probably going to happen, if we're being honest, on the basis of what's happening in Germany. There's players picking up little things next, left, right and centre. So to bring you're probably bringing like your 24th choice player in, and then whereas they would normally not get anywhere near the pitch, you're now able to go, we've got 2 subs left with 3-0 up, there's 25 minutes to go. We'll bring him, Harvey Elliott can have half an hour instead of Mo Salah, but instead of playing with Origi and Minamino, as he did at Shrewsbury, for example, he's playing with Mane and Firmino, which is, it's much more insightful into how these players actually cope, because it's all well and good giving these kids games in League Cup matches, but you're making 11 changes. It's not the team. They don't get the opportunity to play and show exactly what they can do in the exact system that plays in the system that plays on a Saturday afternoon in a Premier League match. And I think you'd learn so much more from that, and it's good to be having the opportunity to do just that.
Okay, yesterday, John Gibbons spoke to Lawrence Westgaff in Prince's Park. Let's go to it.
It's John Gibbons for the Anfield app, and I'm with Lawrence Westgaff, and we're going to talk about Black Lives Matter. Lawrence is a historian in Liverpool, an expert in black history and slavery. So first of all, Lawrence, thanks for coming out on a Sunday.
Pleasure, mate. Pleasure. It's lovely weather. So
I know it's been beautiful, hasn't it? So tell us a little bit more about where we are, first of all, if you don't mind, because I know you do tours in Liverpool. We're in Liverpool 8, we're in Prince's Park, and we're by a monument here. So tell us a little bit more about where we are.
Well, this is a very historic park, not just in terms of Liverpool's history, but in terms of history of the country. Prince's Park was founded by a man called Richard Vaughan Yates in 1842, and it became the forerunner of the public parks movement that went on during the mid to late 19th century, and this was the first one. It was from here that Joseph Paxton, who designed the park, went on to design Birkenhead Park, which was the first totally complete public park. This one, it was just a little bit for the lumpen proles. The rest was for the posh people who live in all these beautiful houses around the park. But yeah, so this is where it's a very important place, and it holds quite a place in my heart, because the individual who's involved in establishing it was a man, as I said, called Richard Vaughan Yates, whose family had made all their money through slavery, but yet they used that money to do philanthropic, works, and so they're remembered as being these great philanthropists without the dodgy underside, do you know what I mean? And that's really the story of Liverpool's development, and that's some of the issues that we were addressing yesterday.
Yeah, and we'll come on to yesterday, but I mean, the kind of thing you talked about shows how it's inescapable in Liverpool, to talk about Liverpool's history, to talk about Liverpool's architecture, to talk about, we're just in a park, you think, surely a park's just a park, but even that, is in its ways has, we have to thank, kind of, if that's the right word, slavery for it.
Yeah, absolutely, but the money had to come from somewhere, didn't it? And when you talk about Liverpool, you're talking about the quintessential slavery city. London and Bristol both had histories before their involvement in the slave trade. Liverpool didn't. Liverpool in 1700 was a little fishing hamlet. Do you know what I mean? It was a tiny little place, probably about 4,000, 5,000 people. And then within 100 years, it was the second most populous place in the country. Only London had a larger population than Liverpool in 1800. That was primarily due to trade with the Americas and West Africa. And that trade obviously took in the slave trade and slave-produced goods.
So yesterday, there were, on the TV, everyone saw what was going down in London. You know, very sort of negative protests. They were called. Here in Liverpool, it was a different story, wasn't it?
The total party atmosphere. Do you know what I mean? Drumming, singing, dancing. It was fantastic, and good positive messages were coming across. You know, and it was a beautifully mixed crowd. There was no, you know, it. For me, like that's what it's all about. If you're gonna demonstrate, let's do it in a way which is constructive, not destructive.
So, I mean, you spoke at the march yesterday. You spoke on the steps of St George's Hall, I think it was, which is obviously another building, obviously very intertwined in Liverpool's history. What did you say to those people who come there yesterday?
Well, my primary message was that we've got to find constructive ways of building change. So I'm all about. So the big thing has been like tearing down monuments. So I said, you know, let's not worry about tearing down monuments. Let's worry about building up communities. You know what I mean? Because that's what I'm all about. Like that amount of positive energy directed in a positive way. There's nothing that can stop it. Do you know what I mean? And I think like the easy thing to do is to go and pull down a monument and then say, "All right, see you next week." Do you know what I mean? No improvements in your life, no improvements in your environment, but you feel like, you know, you've done something a bit subversive. Well, I don't think there's anything more subversive than building up deprived communities.
What makes you positive for the future, Lawrence? Because it's you must in a way sort of feel like you've been fighting your whole life. And you know, I was reading something, you know, earlier today about the guys who protested the Olympics, and they stood up and did the Black Power, and that was like 50 years ago now. And part of you must feel like, you know, we're not making progress, but obviously you're still here, you're still, you know, doing what you did yesterday. So there must be something that gives you kind of positivity.
Well, I think that it's a constant struggle. Do you know what I mean? It's like constant vigilance. It's never going to change. You're always going to get people who want to reel things back. Do you know what I mean? Then it's progressive people who move things forward, and that's how it is. Things aren't always getting better. Things aren't only getting worse. You know, like Tony Benn said, you know, this generation has to fight the same battles as the last generation. There's no final victories and there's no final defeats, and that's really how I feel. Like, I don't ever think there'll be a time when you can rest. Do you know what I mean? You've always got to stay there. And Liverpool people are known for that. Do you know what I mean? We are a turbulent people. We are a turbulent city. But it's that which really pushes us forward against adversity. And, you know, that's something that I celebrate.
Football's a massive thing in this city, obviously. We wouldn't exist if that wasn't the case. Do you think the football clubs have got a role to play in this? And what role can they do in a positive way?
Oh, absolutely. You know, football players, you know, the celebrity culture that we have in this country and elsewhere gives them a particular platform, doesn't it? And they can use that platform in a multitude of different ways. I really respect sports people who are willing to go out there on a limb for their beliefs, you know, just like any normal people, like, you know, like us. They should be willing to put their careers on the line if they want to see progress. Too many sports people are quiet. That's why I look up to people like Muhammad Ali or Colin Kaepernick nowadays. He's probably the one, or LeBron James, you know. And I would love to hear our footballers being more vocal about what they believe. I know it might be seen to be a bit edgy, but, you know, how much money do you need?
The players, you know, at Liverpool do seem to have taken a stand recently. There was the picture of them sort of, you know, dropping the knee, and it was as visual image. It was very striking, and I know it went around the world as well. I had people messaging me about it, you know, all over the place, and not just kind of Liverpool fans. Does that make you proud when you see that?
Absolutely, very powerful. And the fact that it was player-led was something that really resonated, because that was a collective stance, and we're willing to say, well, if you're going to do it, I'll do it. And that's what people have to do, otherwise you'd end up like Colin Kaepernick, ostracised and, you know, basically sacked.
Thanks to John, thanks to Lawrence. It seems pretty clear to me that the Premier League, the players first, Gareth, have made the stance crystal clear on the Black Lives Matter movement. We're going to see that, I think, from step one. It's something that, you know, I heartily endorse. I think everyone who's attached to the Anfield rap heartily endorses, in terms of these footballers haven't communicated exactly what they think, exactly what they feel, the Premier League backing them, and that this is the direction of travel on a societal basis, and it's a direction of travel for the support, for the sport, and everyone connected to it.
Yeah, great to see Liverpool doing what they've been doing. Great to see the Premier League doing what they've been doing. And I think in the past as well, you know, football as in general hasn't sort of judged the temperature right at times. And, you know, there's been too many rules and regulations that have stopped things that should have happened. You know, in the past, you could have seen this maybe labelled as being political and something that maybe that the Premier League wouldn't want to get involved with and stuff like that. So to be decisive, to make a decision, you know, this is what we're doing, to blaze it across the shirt and to show the support. And Liverpool doing what they were doing as well. We talked about that before. Obviously, it was organised by Van Dijk and Van Alzen, I think it was. Van spoke really well on the issue in the past as well, emotionally so as well. And look, these are our, some of these lads are our heroes. We pay a lot of money to see them. We enjoy what they do. And they shouldn't have to put up with this shit, to be honest with you. And they have had to for all these years, for all this time, and something does need to change. Hopefully this is the catalyst finally for change, for conversation, for people to act differently. We'll see, because we've had these moments before, and then it does seem to slip back at times. Hopefully that this isn't that time. And it's also, it's acting as a way of exposing people, isn't it, at the moment? I mean, as you just said, I think everyone involved in the Anfield app, we're pretty sure on the views. We all know where they stand. And people who sort of step outside that now, not at the Anfield app, just in general, they look a bit strange, they look a bit weird, they look a bit archaic. You wonder why they still carry these views in 2020. And they're all made to look a little bit daft. But this certainly reflects us, Liverpool. I imagine, I'd like to think, the majority of the country. So yeah, it made perfect sense.
It seems as though Gareth mentioned the sort of the politics of it there, that in the past the Premier League may have stood back. Dan, what's hit me on it is the fact that the Premier League captains, and by extension therefore the players, have spoken emphatically with one voice. And I think that's very, very important, and that's got out into the public domain, I think, is very, very important as well. The Premier League are supporting the players in this. And I think for me, that's a massive sea change that there is. In the past, the players have made it clear where the togetherness is. But on this instance, they have acted in a political sense, if you see what I mean. They've acted as a collective. They've been emphatic. And I think, I'm not saying the Premier League would have chosen otherwise, but I do think that they have left the Premier League with no choice.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we sort of put the whole last 3 months in that context too. And also, the wider past around football and footballers' perception from within the own game, from within the FA and other governing bodies. It's totally justifiable that footballers didn't feel at times comfortable altogether, or altogether, with a wholehearted faith in something like Kick It Out, because ultimately it did feel a little bit tokenry, and it did feel like it was a load of middle to old age white men trying to put in place procedures that don't really represent a lot of what people were feeling. And within that, they're professionals within the game. And I think what we've seen around COVID-19 and the voice that players got was that they actually can be arbiters. They actually can be trusted to do this themselves, which, a lot of us have known for a long time, that these are very, very clued up, socially aware young men who have a voice and have a responsibility, and therefore, why not use their influence as idols to give them this platform? Because we're giving them a platform to go and play with a ball every week and asking them to, change young people's lives for the better. Well, why not give them the voice? And why not all use Raheem Sterling as someone who turns around and says, well, if I do this, then I'm perceived as subconsciously being, privileged, or I'm seen as being flashy. Whereas if my teammate does it, he's seen as being a good lad doing something for his mum. Every one of the Premier League's footballers being Raheem Sterling's voice is just as good as him doing it, and it sort of spreads that message far and wide, and it sort of redacts the tribalism that is still, I don't think it is present in this sense, but it is present in a football sense, that you can say, well, you wouldn't say, well, he's only doing it just because, or there's a but to any angle, but there are certain elements whereby football and who you support comes into it, and it shouldn't. And I think that to sort of use this message cohesively is massive, because I think you have to look at what happened in London at the weekend too, and all the stuff around it being football lads related was not helpful at all, because go on, Neil.
No, I was going to say it stands. You know, what you saw at the weekend what you saw at the weekend with the fascists stands in direct opposition to the footballers themselves, and it's quite a juxtaposition. The footballers themselves have made it very, very clear where they are and what they think, and you know, Dan, they're very clearly, yeah, it's oppositional to everything that you saw from the fascists who were co-opting football chants and football language at the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely that. And like I say, you know, I think it's right that the footballers are being made now the voice, because they are. The issue inevitably centres around what they can do to a wider society within the powers that they have, and they have huge powers socially. So that needs to be used, and that needs to be given to them and trusted with them, which I'm glad it's being doing now.
It's the last little thing on it, Phil, is the weekend scenes where, you know, it's quite clear that there's an edge there, and we talk at the Anfield Wrap, we've talked repeatedly about the way in which football supporters are described, the way in which footballers are described throughout the whole of this crisis across the last 3 months. I'm hoping we're approaching the stage where we may not need to do it anymore, but it is striking there is a desire to associate those people at the weekend with football. And I think that, to an extent, football and football supporters, ever so slightly, we have actually got to own that a little bit. You know, this has been going on within the game, not within the support that we know, not within, you know, a lot of Liverpool support, but it has been present within the game for a period of time. And it does need to be absolutely eradicated. And these people do need to be told by their own supporter groups the way in which it works. It's not an easy thing to do, but that this stuff is downright unacceptable, and it's beyond archaic, as Gareth says. It's Neanderthal behaviour.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad as a support we're effectively in an echo chamber where it doesn't exist, because I can't really think of how unenjoyable it would be going to football and having to stand next to these people. So it is quite nice that as a city that we sort of managed to separate ourselves from it, but it is sort of something that football has to take on board as a whole and eliminate itself, because it's not something that I don't feel that it can be policed by an outside force. It's got to be from within to get rid of these people. It's also a lot of stupidity as well, like people going, we're going to go and defend the cenotaph. Why?
Yeah.
What? Why are you going to defend the cenotaph? What do you think is going to happen to a cenotaph? Like, and that's the kind of argument that they're representing. They're not really representing an argument, they're just representing their own stupidity, really. So it's, whilst football does need to do something, they're almost beyond help to a point, because what you're supposed to say to people who think that you've taken from the whole last 2 or 3 weeks is that you need to go out there and defend the cenotaph. Why?
Just on that, Gareth, just to close it off, you know, you've written brilliantly around this last couple of weeks in the Anfield Wrap in different ways. It is, football support's a complex thing, and that's always been our argument, our position in a number of different ways, that you can't pigeonhole football supporters. The game in general, in a wide English-based sense, I think it is fair to say that it does still have some of these issues. It's not as bad as it has been, but it does still have some of these issues. And as Phil says, it does seem as though it'll be difficult for outside bodies to deal with it. It is something that football supporters right the way across the country will have to think about, will have to engage with, and will have to eradicate.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think we're getting there. I really do feel like we're getting there. You know, if you think back sort of 20 years or whatever, you know, let's be honest about it. You know, like Liverpool had plenty of racists. Yep. Anfield had plenty of racists. You heard it at the match. And people say things like, oh, yeah, you know, it all changed when John Barnes played for Liverpool. It didn't really. It was still there. And there's even been stuff that I think we all need to maybe have a bit of a think about as we move on. I mean, you think about, in the past, I've brushed away the idea that giving Raheem Sterling a load of shit and calling him a greedy bastard when he comes to Anfield is anything other than just winding up a player. But, you know, is there something else there? Is there something else we need to think about? Is there something else there in the way some people reacted to Daniel Sturridge, just his general demeanour, his character, the way he celebrated goals, the fact that he was into music, the clothes he wore, whatever? You know, was he examined in a different way by some of us to a white player, you know, displaying the same characteristics, really? So I think it's one of them now that, you know, this whole situation and the lockdown generally has given everyone time to think, and hopefully think in a way about stuff that brings us together, not divides us. I mean, you're seeing a lot of extreme stuff at the moment on the streets. Obviously, the media puts a magnifying glass on the most extreme stuff. That's the way it's always worked. But I'd like to think that, you know, what we're starting to see, hopefully, are more intelligent conversations, not just in football, but hopefully in politics as well. But in football, you know, I think there is now fans that want the game to be a good thing, that they want their club to be seen in a good way, want their city to be seen in a good way, and are conscious of how their behaviour affects all that. And I think things like, you know, like Spirit of Shankly, like the Football Supporters Association, as it's now called, and various other fan groups, and even stuff like the food banks, stuff that fans come together regularly around, fundraising, all the good stuff that goes on, basically. You know, I feel like that wasn't always the case. That didn't always happen. And now, you know, it's starting to happen more and more. And people are prepared to listen more and more, get involved more and more, give up their time more and more. And long may all that continue. I feel, but I'm a white lad from Huyton who grew up with one black lad in my whole school. So what do I know? But I feel that it is that things look like, to me at least, that they're pointing in the right direction. And hopefully that is the case for everyone.
Absolutely. At the Anfield Wrap, we obviously want to be, as much as we can, more inclusive. That's in every single sense. Neil at theanfieldwrap.com if you want to get in touch about any aspect of this. Neil at theanfieldwrap.com. Give us a shout and we'll go from there. Back to absolute fluff, more fluff than you know what to do with. Philippe Coutinho links have re-emerged. Pre-corona, Phil, as I said, not a chance. Now I do feel it might be a little bit one of them where it's who knows. It feels more possible to me post the virus, because it may well just line up for Liverpool in a financial sense as a 12-month thing or something like that. What do you think?
In the circumstance, it makes perfect sense. I think in this world where we're as normal, I think we would have signed Timo Werner. I don't think it was anything that would have even been a conversation about. Sorry. But now you look at it and you think, well, Barcelona don't want him. They probably still owe us a lot of money. We're financially being cautious. So if you can get him on loan for 12 months and then you don't even have to sign him at the end of 12 months, what's the downside here? Like, sometimes you can look at these things and think, well, no, that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense. The only reason you can argue against it really is like a pride thing and saying, well, he said he wanted Rib before, so why are we want him back? Which, right, fair enough, but that's potentially self-defeating. At the end of the day, all we're interested in is Liverpool winning trophies, and are we more likely to win trophies next season with Coutinho than with no one? Because that's what might come down to. It might be literally Coutinho or no one. It's like, well, what's the reason to not do it?
Dan, what do you think? As I say, pre-corona, as I said, not a chance. What do you think now?
I think the pride concept is interesting, and I wonder whether it works both ways a little bit. In that, you know, we've got this thing with Barcelona now, where we did have where when they took Coutinho, it was don't even bother coming back for another 2 years, and it was sort of written into the deal in some ways that they couldn't come and get another Liverpool player. You know, obviously the success that's happened and the lack of success that's transpired in Spain means that the danger of that now, them poaching from us, is far more unlikely than it was. But I think what I'm sort of angling at is I wonder whether Barcelona would have an anyone but Liverpool type of approach to this, in that I get Phil's point that they probably owe us for the deal and stuff like that, but Liverpool would want a lot of subsidies for this deal, even on loan, in terms of wages and stuff. And you've got to think of what Barca wants and what Jarabshian would want for Coutinho. And I think there would be a lot more willing parties who would bow to what those two parties want from a deal more than Liverpool. I think Liverpool would want to dictate a lot of what the deal meant. I also think there's an Naby Keita element to this, in that I think that any deal for Coutinho would sort of impact on that Keita Minamino development and their transition. And I think, you know, you can argue that Keita should have really made a bigger leap into Liverpool's first team than he has, for injury and stuff like that. But there is a conversation to be had around Keita and his deal. He's in his third season, going into his fourth at Liverpool very soon, so he's probably going to need a new deal at some point soon. So what do you do with Keita then? Because if you bring Coutinho back, even in a loan sense, that could be stifling, and it could impact on whether the player does sort of stay on Merseyside and dedicate his next 3 to 4 years with us, or if we sort of cut ties. And I do think there's that bit of vagueness around just what the club thinks of Keita and where his development is.
Even in this, like everything Dan just said there, I think he's second and third, actually, Keita on his deal, Dan, because we signed him with the year advance. So it's second and third. But just on that, what Gareth said, what Dan says there, Gareth, one of the things that's really interesting is it straight away throws open the question of, well, where's Coutinho's best position? And it's really that even now, we've seen him however long, he's now played for 2 clubs since us. And you can still walk away and have a bit of a, well, where will Coutinho actually play? What's his best position conversation? And that, to me, has always been one of the things about him. I'm still quite mixed on it. I take Phil's point of why wouldn't you? But what would you do?
Yeah, I'm mixed on it as well. I think purely what Phil's talking about, purely from a football point of view, I think it does make loads of sense. And if you can make the finances work, if you can basically have Barcelona's kicks off for a second time, then happy days. But as Dan's saying, it's whether Barcelona want to allow that to happen. Given they will know, they will be aware. They're a club that are very aware of how they look in situation. They're also skint. So, there is that aspect, like who else wants him? Who else is in for him? And could this be the only viable way of getting anything back in that situation? Maybe it happens. I think more about the sort of, look, I liked him, obviously, but I know what you're saying about it. Felt like, towards the end, he was being shoehorned in a little bit. Obviously, he was capable of winning games. He always was. Obviously, he was good on, free kicks and the rest of it. He could produce Coutinho moments, and, it'd be quite nice to see some of them again. I think more about the sort of the code and the culture around what they've got at Liverpool and what it would say if he was allowed back around that. I think we can brush that away and just say, it's just about winning matches. But, Klopp's worked hard with his team to have a certain culture, to have everyone on the same page. And I think we all know that Phil's obviously still got some mates back at Liverpool, so maybe that would help with that, and maybe that could cast over some of what went on. But, think about what went on. Think about that, spoiled for a move right at the start of a season. Think about all that stuff that was all over Sky Sports. Think about when, there was a questionable injury, to say the least. Think about when, we could have done him for games, could have done with him playing in games. And, he sat in a room watching on the telly, doing interviews with the Daily Mail. So, there's a lot of baggage there for me. There's a lot of stuff around that, question marks around that. But we can never know that. Like, how does Klopp actually get on with Coutinho? Like, could he not be arsed with him in the end, human with him? Or did he get it and just say it's inevitable to that? Like, there's what he says publicly and there's what he actually thinks. Same with the players. So I guess Klopp can take that temperature, both of himself and of the team and of the culture and everything else, and go, actually, it won't matter. Phil would be welcomed back with open arms. These lads would like him. We'd be all right. And he's a potential match winner. Happy days. Or on the flip side, fuck that, I don't want to deal with him and his agents again. So, we can't know that, really.
Phil?
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that, really. There's just it's a lot of sort of unknowns, and there's a lot of guessing involved. Because, for example, what you said about relationship with Klopp and the Daily Mail thing, like, ultimately we don't know exactly how football works, and there's a lot of things we sort of have to go, well, yeah, that doesn't make sense, but maybe it does to them, and stuff like this. Like, I think I think he probably did burn some bridges, but at the end of the day, all these people want is Liverpool to win, and you do wonder sort of where they draw the line and what they determine as just being part of football and stuff like that. It's also the fact that I think things for fans not necessarily the same as people who are managing clubs, because they have emotional involvement, but it's not the same level of emotional involvement, is it? I think we just don't know really how they'll approach it. So it's actually quite hard to say what's right and what's wrong, I think, to be perfectly honest.
Okay, more than fair enough there from Phil. Listen, hope you've enjoyed the Anfield wrap this week. Obviously, next Monday we will be talking about Liverpool's game against Everton. That's pretty exciting. Loads and loads of stuff going on on the Anfield Wrap through the week. Lots of excellent shows, and we're all building up. We'll be doing Hot Mic on Wednesday night. Come and be part of that for those 2 games there. The first one back being the game for Villa, Sheffield United, and then Man City versus Arsenal. We'll be doing Hot Mic on the Friday night as well. If you download the app and you use the code Anfield Wrap, we'll be there for that. And then we will also be doing on Sunday. All 3 games will be on Hot Mic. There'll be all the post-match stuff that you normally get from the Anfield Wrap. We'll be doing previews on Facebook and in a variety of different places. Tons and tons of social media. We're made up to be back talking about this fantastic football team. Come and join us for all of those things. We'd be very, very pleased to have you. Until then, thank you very much indeed to Gareth Roberts, to Phil Blundell, and to Dan Morgan. Enjoy your week, whatever it is you're up to. Subscribe if you haven't. But regardless, take it easy and all the best.
All right, the Reds, thanks very much for watching another Anfield Wrap video. Thanks very much for supporting the Anfield Wrap all these years, and particularly during the current crisis that we're all going through. We'd like your support on one more thing, and that is your vote in the British Podcast Awards Listener's Choice. It's really easy to vote for the Anfield Wrap in this. Just go to the BritishPodcastAwards.com/vote. You can search for the Anfield Wrap there, select the Anfield Wrap, make sure you verify your email. The email may well drop into your spam folder or your trash folder. Verify your vote. You've voted for the Anfield Wrap, you've done your bit, and hopefully when the vote closes on July the 6th, we're going to win the thing this time, because we've come second 3 times now to BBC-backed podcasts, and this time we want to win it, because you know what our mate Bill said about coming first and coming second, and this time we've got a thirst for first. So do your bit, please. Nice one. Vote for us. Vote for the Anfield Wrap. Up the Reds.